All right, well, welcome everyone. I think we'll go ahead and get started. We are very excited to bring you today's panel discussion on amplifying the voices of Black disabled people abroad. And before we get started, I just wanted to share a few access tips with you regarding using the Zoom platform. And also as a note, this webinar is being recorded, so we will be sharing the recording after we upload the captions to the video with everybody in the next 2 to 3 days. In addition, this discussion will not include any PowerPoint slides except the ones you see right now. And there will only be the panelists, the moderator, and an ASL interpreter on screen. You can go to the next slide. So let's go ahead and talk about some access tips for this session. First, just want to make sure everybody keeps their microphones and video off until a moderator invites you to turn them on. Also, if you plan to use audio, make sure to use a quiet room or headphones is always recommended. And to view the captions, make sure to click the CC button at the bottom, the closed caption button at the very bottom of the Zoom screen. And you can also use the stream text link that's also provided in the chat box. If you do have a comment to share or any technical issues, I will primarily be the host taking care of those matters, so please feel free to send a direct chat to the host. And also use the hide non-video participants feature to make it easier to see the interpreters and the speakers. Next screen. And so just a little bit more to elaborate on the hide non-video participants feature. We do have many people joining us today. We'll only primarily have a few screens on, and so to make sure you get the very best view of the interpreters and active presenters, you want to make sure to remove all the clutter of the black screen boxes for your Zoom screen. On the left is a picture of Zoom with many black boxes with people's name and some different active presenters and interpreters. On the right is an image of just the presenters and ASL interpreter. You can go to the next screen. So how you do this is to find any participant whose video is turned off and go to their screen and select the ... button in the top corner and select hide non-video participants from the drop-down menu. Okay. Thanks, Ashley, for those slides. And hello and welcome everybody again. Today's panel discussion on amplifying the voices of Black disabled people abroad. My name is Monica Malhotra, and I'm the program manager for the National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange, which is sponsored by the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs and administered by Mobility International USA. Our mission with the Clearinghouse is to ensure more people with disabilities have access to the broad range of international exchange programs and have equitable experiences. As we honor Black History Month this month, and as we seek to further advance access and inclusion in international exchange each day, we want to provide a space for Black disabled students to share their unique experiences of participating in study abroad, and also to share some recommendations for international educators to further support students with diverse identities in the full cycle of international exchange programs. We have an incredible panel for you today, including Joy Letty Moran, Jillian Giles, and DRC Neal. And we are very honored to have Morena Montgomery, the Assistant Director of Study Abroad for Howard University, moderate the conversation today. We'll have time for Q&A at the end of the session, but feel free to send me the questions throughout the discussion directly in the chat box, and I'll begin collecting them so I can share at the end of the discussion in the portion of Q&A. Welcome again, and thank you so much for joining. We're only able to promote this on Friday, but we've had such a great response. So thank you for your interest in this topic. And I will go ahead and invite Morena and our panelists to turn on their videos, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Thank you so much, Monica, and good afternoon. As mentioned, my name is Morena Montgomery. My pronouns are she and her. And I'm an able-bodied, cisgendered African-American and Native woman with a spiritual connection to nature and a calling to doing the empowering social justice work of connecting minoritized people to self-development opportunities through study abroad. I currently do this work at my alma mater, Howard University, in the Ralph J. Bunche International Affairs Center as the Assistant Director for Study Abroad. And I would like to give a very warm welcome to all of the attendees and thank you for tuning in to this historically less common discussion, yet one that is right on time. It is both an honor and a pleasure to moderate today's panel, Amplifying the Experiences of Black Disabled People Abroad. And as we get started, I'm compelled to underscore the importance of entering this conversation, bearing in mind that this is an uncensored and safe space built from the generosity and the grace of our amazing panelists. So by the end of this discussion, we hope that our listeners will come away with a better understanding of nuances within the Black disabled student experience abroad, greater confidence and motivation to study abroad or travel abroad as Black and/or disabled persons, and awareness of why being an ally in support of Black disabled students is an invaluable act of solidarity, and for the professionals in the room, recommendations for ways to support Black disabled students from program design to reentry. So without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce our panelists, Joy Lenny Moran, Jillian Giles, and DRC Neal. Joy Lenny, would you please lead the panelists off by sharing a bit about your background, then followed by Jillian and DRC?
Hi, everyone. This is Joy Lenny. So I'm an Afro-Latina. I'm wearing curly hair, big glasses. I have a navy blue vest and light blue blouse underneath, which can't really be seen over the light. But I studied abroad in London for about 5 months with my university that had a satellite campus in London. And I am a person with a disability. I have cerebral palsy, and I use a manual wheelchair to get around. I'm also a Dominican immigrant, and I come from quite a history there. And so I would say that one of the many benefits I received while participating in my abroad program was being able to create what I called an access culture guide for students with disabilities based on my own experience while I was there. And I hope that students are still able to use it. And I guess I'll pass it along to the next person, and I look forward to sharing some more about my experience. Oh, sorry, one more thing is that I currently work as part of the NCDE team putting this program together at MIUSA, and so I'm fortunate to have been part of the process since the planning stages.
Hi, my name is Jillian Giles. My pronouns are they, them. Right now, I'm a blonde, light-skinned person wearing a light blue sweater. And I chose to study abroad in the summer program at Amsterdam, where I studied gender, society, and culture as a part of a 6-week program. I am a non-binary Black person who has myasthenia gravis, partial hearing loss, and also lives with mental illness. And I think right now, I am an intern at MIUSA, and I'm currently, I'm a recent graduate of Sarah Lawrence, first of all, and I'm an intern at MIUSA, and I'm currently looking for entry-level positions and furthering my career.
Hi, Hi, everybody. My name is DRC Neal. My pronouns are he, him, and they, them. I am a second year doctoral student in English and Disability Studies at The Ohio State University in the Mia Mia tribe, what is now known as Columbus, Ohio. And yeah, I have studied abroad with Mayusa in 2009 to Costa Rica, but I have also studied in Stuttgart, Germany, and I did my first master's degree in London, England. So I've had a variety of experiences abroad, and I am a dark-skinned Black man. I am currently sitting on my couch. I have blonde dreads kind of thrown to the side and black glasses. And I'm sitting in front of a white wall with a giant photo of London, England behind me. And yeah, it's just really nice to be here.
Thank you all for those introductions. Okay, now let's dive deeper into the heart of the matter and begin with a discussion around identity and program preparation for study abroad in 3 questions, and I'll give them to you slowly or break them down. Would you each start by sharing how your identities may have influenced your planning for study abroad, such as the selection of the countries you studied in? And Joylene, would you like to continue?
Sure. Be happy to get us started. I think there was a lot of considerations for me starting to plan and just having an interest in going abroad. Studying abroad was part of my major requirements. I studied global public health and sociology, so it was already part of my curriculum. But it was mentioned to me several times that I didn't have to do it, although I really wanted to. And I think a lot of what I was thinking about when I needed to study abroad is I wanted to go to a place where I would be safe. That was a priority for me in terms of my identity. And I also wanted to make sure that it was accessible. And I was also thinking about budget. So there was a lot of things that I was considering at once. And so I think that when we're talking about, I know salient identities is something that is talked about a lot within education abroad. And for me, it was really like a trade-off of things about where I should go. So one example that comes to mind in particular is just having to choose a more expensive location because of accessibility rather than choosing a location that perhaps would be more budget friendly for what I was having because of lack of accessibility. So that was one thing that I considered.
Thank you, and we'll dive a bit deeper into the expense portion of that a bit later. Jillian, would you like to go next?
Absolutely. So I think the first thing that influenced my choice and ability to study abroad was the fact that I had an American passport. So I had a lot of opportunity and options. Second of all, after that, I definitely was financially able to have a lot of opportunities and options, and that was definitely a privilege. And then after that, I definitely considered what I was studying. I was really focused on sociology, and I wanted a program that centered around like studying culture. So I chose the program in Amsterdam. And I also really resonate with what Joylene was saying about safety, because I think for me at the time, I chose Amsterdam just because I was really not wanting to have to compromise my gender expression or communication around that. I really wanted to pick somewhere where I felt safe to express my queerness in the ways that I wanted to. And I felt like Amsterdam would be a good place for that, with the intersections of like also what I wanted to study. Yeah.
So I wasn't sure, like, if I'm allowed to add on to that, but I just wanted to say that, so, as a queer person, like, I mean, it may seem kind of obvious, but, it was like when I was trying to pick a place that I wanted to go, um, London and Germany, specifically Europe, is known for being more progressive than, a vast majority of the industrialized world. And you know, I was what, 23 at the time when I was looking for my master's programs, and so I was thinking about the fact that I'm going to be a single person. I'm going to be out in the world. Master's degree is long, so I was like, I don't plan to exist in obscurity by myself in my room all the time. I intend to go and have drinks and go dating and meet people. And I wanted to make sure that, it's bad enough being disabled where people already see you as a potential weakness or a threat, especially when you're a foreigner, and they assume you're a tourist when you're not really. And so, yeah, it's like having to mitigate all of those things simultaneously, on top of the fact that, Germany has done a very good job in, propagating anti-racist uh, everything, really. I mean, the country has, since the World War II, they have almost swung almost exclusively to the left. And there are issues, of course, but it is a big factor in where I would choose to go, because not only do I want to be safe, but I want to have fun. And so that probably takes out a lot of the places I would go, just because I don't want to be thinking about, harm all the time when I'm doing, work or studying.
Thank you. Thank you all. Okay, let's continue to talk about the pre-departure part of this. Sorry, this is Morena. Will you also each share what factors influence your decision to disclose or not disclose your disability, and what it was like working with study abroad staff to plan for any disability-related needs and accommodations? And this is of particular importance to students who are preparing to go abroad, as some may be considering whether or not to disclose a disability, either visible or not, that they may have. Anyone can start.
So this is DRC. I can start this. When I chose to go to London, I not only did I have to disclose a disability, but I was, in my mind, I'm like, the more information you have, the better, because not disclosing to the fullest ability is only going to make the whole conversation more difficult. Roehampton University, where I went to school, was very open about the fact that I was the first disabled international postgrad student that they'd ever had. So they knew virtually next to nothing. And what ensued was a bunch of pictures and measuring tape and questions about, what is 26 millimeters in American metric, because we don't use the metric system. So they were like, what is that in inches? What is that in centimeters? Can your chair fit through the door? And what I would say that, while they tried to do the best that they could, there are some things that cannot be changed. So, like, for example, the majority of Roehampton University is on gravel. And my section, the English department, was literally in the back. It's kind of like Hogwarts. There are literally, I mean, the people there hate that connection, but it literally is like that, because they have 4 separate colleges that are, each have a house cat and a house color. And so my house was the English house, but it was literally in the back on gravel, which made rolling in my wheelchair on a daily basis a huge chore. And they warned me, but there was like nothing really that anybody could do about it. So you just kind of have to get it into your mind that if you really want to do this, if this is something you really want to do, then know that it's not going to be perfect. Everybody is going to have to be adapting to everything and you kind of just make the best of it, as corny as that sounds.
I can follow up with that. I definitely have to agree with DRC. It's a lot of navigating and trying to figure out what's going to work, what's not going to work, and how access really looks like in another country. I feel like there's a lot of like an understanding of what your services are like in the US versus how that might reflect or interpret in another country. Particularly, I waited until it was my senior year to study abroad because, and one of the main reasons for this is that I wasn't seeing enough accessibility information in any of the panels and info sessions that I went to. And so that sort of deterred me and sort of had me a bit afraid of like what it would actually look like. And I knew it would be different just because as a Dominican immigrant to the US, I knew that access differed everywhere. And so I recall this like one particular instance where I attended my accepted students info session, and the first thing I saw was like a picture of the academic center where the front entrance had 3 steps to get in. And so my first question to those putting the session together right after was like, well, in a wheelchair, like how am I going to get into the academic center to attend my classes? And they're like, oh, we don't know. You'd have to ask the Center for Students with Disabilities. And, you know, that's kind of disheartening to not have such valuable information right away. I'm thankful that the Center for Students with Disabilities was great in sort of keeping up with those gaps that the study abroad office seemed to have and providing me with like more information. But I think even though they tried so much and did what I think would be a good job, I still learned a lot within like the first 4 weeks I was there. That was just like about navigating the local community where, yeah, so I think that's a pretty good cover of what it felt like, at least.
There's no pressure to respond, but Jillian, did you have a response for this question?
Absolutely. For me, I think with disclosure, I was really lucky. Most of my paperwork was already at like my home school. So it was really just a matter of transferring the paperwork and my accommodations. I also have learning disabilities, so a lot of my accommodations and paperwork really had to do with like making sure that like teachers were aware of my learning disabilities, that other people and staff were also like aware of things like that. And then the other side of it with me, and I think a lot of disabled people is a lot of self-management. Like I really had to make sure that I wasn't overexerting myself. And I also had to make sure that I said no. And that kind of stuff happens with and without disclosure. I also did not choose to disclose my disability to a lot of my friends or people that I met on the study abroad program. It was really something that like was exclusively communicated to like staff and administrative people. The thing that I did do is I did wear a medical bracelet, which isn't something I was before that time as in practiced. And I think in hindsight, I would have disclosed to a couple friends just for safety reasons.
Thank you, Jillian. That's really an important point that you're making that maybe folks aren't really considering or knowing to consider, and that's just the importance of knowing that a student may not have disclosed their disability to their peers, so the importance of holding that information confidential, but then also now for you to reflect on how you may have shared that with more of your peers or the folks that you found to be friends for that added layer of safety for your own self wellness. Thank you. So just continuing a bit further as we look at identity, when we were planning for this, there was the mention of disability culture and how that can vary from one country to another. And so you've touched on some things in the last response, but I just want to offer this time as well to share any of your experiences. So how did you experience your disability or other identities in different countries? So DRC, you've traveled to multiple countries. Joylene, I think you may have traveled while you were studying abroad. How did your experience change in the different countries that you traveled in?
So to start with this, I would say the culture of the country is incredibly important because it will determine how the rest of it kind of plays out. For example, like when I traveled to Costa Rica, colorism there isn't that big of a deal because so many people are dark. But then, disability became a huge problem, and people were literally stopping traffic to take pictures of us. Uh, and then you juxtapose that with, for example, the story that I have in my head is France. So when I went to France, the analogy that I always use is that Paris is to France like New York is to America. And I feel like that's a very apt description because Parisians have this kind of idea. They know that their city is amazing and they act like it. So when that translates to disability, like when you're in their space, they're kind of just like, what are you doing? And I remember very specifically like that the thing that sums this up the most is that I was out one day with a friend and we were super determined that we were going to go to Notre Dame because I had never seen it and I wanted to, but to get there you needed to take a train 3 stops down, and the wheelchair ramp was locked on the wall via policemen. There were no police around, so I couldn't use the ramp. So I decided to get out of my wheelchair, and I got on the ground and put my chair into the train and then crawled up behind it, and people were just kind of staring at me. And then we got to the Notre Dame stop and the train doesn't really stop, so you kind of have to I had to fall out, to then, which everybody then started being afraid for my safety, which was hilarious. But then after I got to the stop, now a policeman shows up out of the blue and tells me that I have to go back because there is no elevator at the Notre Dame stop and there's only an escalator. And he said it so cavalierly that it was like, so what would you like me to do? Like, your maps and things don't put this into context, so how was I supposed to know? And basically a bunch of people were crowding around, and these two 16-year-old French girls came up to me and was like, so are you gonna help him or not? Because it's literally your job to help him up the escalator. And he was like, that's not my business, and walked away. So then the two 16-year-old girls were like, well, if you're not going to do it, then we will. And two 16-year-old girls took me onto the escalator and braced me on either side and literally lifted me onto the escalator as I watched like an 80-year-old woman whop this policeman over the head with her bag because people were so upset with the policeman for the way he treated me. And I just was laughing the entire time because I'd never seen anything like that. So, I mean, I think it's the understanding that people know that disabilities should be respected, but the culture clash between the two just kind of gets in the way. And so there's kind of it's your fault. You came here, you deal with it. But I think that if you're going to travel, be prepared for a lot of that. Getting in people's faces, being upfront about what you need and when, and not hesitating to tell people that no, you have to do this because it's just basic human decency. you know, it's not my fault that you built stairs where there should be access, but I'm going to go see this basilica whether you want it or not. So, you know, I think getting really upfront and in your face to other people is a prerequisite. And I mean, I'm glad I did, because I mean, it was amazing. And that's the only reason that I'm on passport number 2 after 24 different countries.
If we can all just snap. I felt that. Thank you for sharing that, DRC. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, Joylene or Jillian, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I would like to add to that. I think you brought up a great point, DRC, of having to advocate for yourself while you're abroad. And I think that's something that I thought about before, but it really becomes a whole different feeling when you're in the moment. While in London, I don't think I had to do this as much, but while I traveled to other parts of Europe, like when I went on my trip to Barcelona, I had to, it seemed like I had to prove my disability, although it was very visible. Like I was in a manual wheelchair, so to me, it seemed like pretty straightforward what it was. But I remember this particular instance when I got on a tour bus and I was traveling with a group of friends. We were all a group of 5 or 6 Black girls, and we were traveling together. And we got on this tour bus to sort of get a tour of Barcelona. And I remember I also used crutches to walk. So I remember choosing to take my crutches so that I could go to the second level of the tour bus to sort of explore the city with my friends, like we were doing. And when I got on the bus, everything was fine. They put down the ramp for me to get on and everything. But then when it was time for me to get off the bus, the driver refused to put the ramp out again because he said that I was able to go up the steps to the second level of the bus. So I was perfectly fine to go out of the bus without the ramp. And it became a very agitating moment where I had to explain to this person that I had gotten on the bus with a ramp because I was using my wheelchair, and I would get off the bus using a ramp because that's what I needed. And it was a moment where I particularly became very aware of my different identities because of the way that the person and the people around me were talking. And there were racist comments, there were ableist comments, obviously, gender-based comments, and it came to a point where I chose to reveal that I spoke Spanish and I was understanding everything that they were saying, and that I would not be getting off the bus until they chose to put down the ramp. You know, it's like a moment of fear because you're not sure, like, how do I tackle this without making a big scene for my safety and the safety of my friends? But how do I still advocate for myself to make sure that I'm safe? Because I knew that although I could go up the steps to the second floor, I could not go down from the bus without using the ramp to get off with my wheelchair. So yeah, it's those moments of like having to prove who you are, even though it's clear, which can be annoying. But
Thank you. Thank you. Jillian, did you want to dive in or?
No, we can do the next question.
Okay. Thank you. This is Marina. I have to remember to say that. I would like to thank you both for sharing in such a vulnerable way, right? And this is a really good point for our audience to be encouraged and reminded that as panelists, you all are really being generous by recalling incidents that may not have been the highlights of your time abroad, but they really are informative, and it will be a service to all of us doing this work. So I just want to thank you. So at this point, it feels relevant as well to explore how your experiences within the context of the study abroad participant group influenced your time abroad. With an awareness of the limited diversity in study abroad from the Open Doors reports published by the Institute for International Education, with 6.4% of participants identifying as Black or African American, 10.5% as those who disclose having a disability, and 3.3% of the 10.5% having a physical disability in the years 2018-2019. So as Black and disabled students, did you ever feel isolated within the study abroad group? And if so, did that influence your desire to connect with local communities, with shared identities while you were abroad? I'll pause there if someone would like to share their experience.
This is Jillian. Sure.
Okay, please.
For me, my experience abroad and my experience within my group, well, it was really hard at times. I was really isolated within my group because there was only one other Black person, and altogether there were only 3 people of color. The thing that I did share in common with all of my group is, one, the desire to study abroad in Amsterdam and study society and culture, but also the fact that most of us, if not all of us, were either wealthy or upper middle class or middle class. We all had a certain degree of access. And I think that's particularly relevant with the summer programs. Yeah, I had a lot of people where I shared identity with them. My roommate was also like a non-binary person, and there were other disabled people on the trip. But I found, because of whiteness, I was really isolated to the other people of color in the group. There was an avoidance of all the people of color on the group, and it was really upsetting for all of us and disheartening, but also allowed for me to really develop kinship within the folks of color in the group and the other Black person I was with. It definitely eventually pushed me to connect with other people in the African diaspora, particularly people from Suriname. Suriname was colonized by the Dutch during colonialism. And although it's not the same as like the United States, where enslaved people were brought to the country, a lot of people from Suriname, because of that connection, end up in the Netherlands. So yeah, I built a lot of connection with people in the country. And I got a lot of context about my own privilege as like an African American versus other people who were from Suriname or from Africa or other places that had less passport privilege, and then like less Western privilege or no Western privilege. I think, another really big point for me was being able to connect with queer people abroad. Most of my socialization in Amsterdam was really being able to connect with queer community, and really being able to see other non-binary, specifically and trans and queer people, and how they live their lives in Amsterdam. And I think also Amsterdam is so transient. I met people from all over the world constantly, and really got just a good understanding of queer people more globally, who were passing through. And that was really, really impactful for me. And I wouldn't change that at all.
I would add, so I had just a really quick, hilarious story about this. I was the only person of color in the entire German village for the 6 months that I lived there, and we were playing hide and seek at 2 o'clock in the morning, in the middle of the summertime, and it was super dark. And there was a giant forest behind the university that people like to go play in. And I remember, like, we were sitting in the student section where the housing was, and I was just watching. I wasn't playing, and I had a friend from Transylvania who was like, "Oh, DRC, you should play hide and seek with us." And I was like, "Why? Like, why would I do that?" And then she was like, "Oh," and she said it so quickly without even thinking about what she meant. She responded, "Well, your skin is so dark and it's so dark outside that, like, if you hide, you will win automatically. No one would ever be able to find you." And the whole group, like, we're talking 70 people, literally turned and looked at, they looked at her. And then I guess she realized at that moment, like, what she physically verbalized. And she was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." She's like, "I didn't mean it like that." And I literally was just like, "Was that your first time, like, giving racist commentary?" Like, and everybody just buzzed out laughing because, like, I mean, she's from Romania. They don't have dark-skinned people there. So the context in her mind, it didn't even cross her mind that what she was saying is ridiculously racist. And I just laughed it off. But I mean, I will say that, like, when you're in those positions, you have to remember that as a Black person, like, people kind of, they know gangster movies, they know thug, you know, aspirations, they know violence and guns, like, when it comes to Black Americans. So, like, I didn't want to go to that level. It wouldn't have done me any good to cuss her out, because they kind of already expect that from you. They expect the neck popping and the chain wearing and the whole nine. So, I think it's, you have to remember that, like, you occupy a dual space at all times, and that can get really exhausting, because there is literally no respite. They were wonderful people. I'm still friends with them to this day, but it doesn't make it any easier. So I just want to point that out.
Thank you for pointing that out. And we definitely have a question that's soon to be asked related to representation. So I'd like to hear more thoughts on that as well. Joy Laney, would you like to respond to anything here, or shall I go on? Okay. All right. Sorry, this is Morena. So before we leave this point, do you have any advice? Does anyone have any advice to share with future students who plan to study abroad related to accessing local communities? Does anyone have an app or a website? Or I know that the Clearinghouse has wonderful resources that they have on their website for in-country support systems and groups for students with disabilities.
So I would say very quickly, Google Map is your friend. And I mean that in ways than just planning where you want to go. Look up hairstylists, look up, like, Black supply stores, look up, like, places you can get lotion. It's a stupid comment to make, but it literally is a lifesaver. Before I went to London, I had a speed dial of stylists on deck, of people that I knew. It might cost you a little money to call them to make appointments, but Google Maps is so great these days that you can get a lot of that information without ever leaving your couch. And a lot of times the study abroad office won't have it. That's culturally specific information that is detrimental to you as a Black person, that they're just not going to have access to. So this is where it comes in again to being a self-advocate, but also being practical. I mean, it's kind of fun to look and see where the nearest hairstylist is, but it's also important because you don't want to be looking busted overseas.
No, you don't. No, you don't. Okay, before we transition away from the topic of the intragroup dynamic, again, do you have any advice or tips that you'd like to offer people watching this to help them better understand the impact that the US group dynamic has on one's time abroad?
Yes, absolutely. This is Jillian. I think for me, racism in Amsterdam was definitely talked about. It was definitely talked about, and there was a PowerPoint, but it was really impactful, just in my life in the US, but also like going abroad. Racism and the effects of racism in the US absolutely had an impact on my ability to socialize and be in community with other people within the group. And I really wish that that was also covered, or talked about or addressed. Yeah.
I'll add to that just really quickly. I think that I unfortunately didn't have, I think, a chance or opportunity to really engage with the local community much. I think it was part of the reason was because there were so many students on campus that were just from my university. So a lot of the experience tended to be localized, I guess, to the student campus experience. And so I think I found myself just, my institution was predominantly a white institution. So it was, I guess, almost expected for the students of color to sort of band together in that program. So there were only a number of students of color. And so I found myself that a lot of the activities or adventures or things were done with my Black friends, and it was just different of an experience for my white peers. Like, I can just say that I didn't travel with any of my white peers because I didn't feel that they would take certain considerations into mind just from interacting with them on a daily basis. And so I felt a lot safer just traveling with my other peers. And so that's one thing that was relevant to my own experience being abroad. I also felt that my Black peers understood a lot better just obstacles in general. So things that came up because of my disability didn't seem as grandeur. For lack of a better word.
This is DRC. I just want to add very quickly that we have a saying here in the US, all skin folk are not kinfolk. And I just want to echo that when you go outside of America, because I remember very specifically that about 5 months into my program in Germany, there was a Black woman who showed up and I was very excited to see her. And she had like multicolored weave and big hoop earrings and acrylic nails. And I'm thinking, this is a sister clearly from East Coast Atlanta, you know? And so I went over to say hi, and she literally flipped her hair and spit on me when she realized that I was American because she was French. And then she literally was like, I hate the Americans, and walked off. And all of my white friends bust out laughing because they were like, this is the first Black person you've seen in 5 months and she hates your guts. She had problems with everything I was doing, from frying chicken to making Kool-Aid. My friend got a care package of Kool-Aid sent to him and everybody ran to me to ask how to make it, which is a whole other story. But I just want to reiterate that just because you find Black people in these spaces does not necessarily mean that y'all are going to be besties, because a lot of times they have a completely different context of what being Black means. And so navigating that is also very important, because you might end up getting your feelings hurt and you didn't even mean to.
This is Morena. I appreciate that perspective as well. And you've all really led me into the question that I have here around what allyship can look like between Black students abroad. So there's been the mention of there being fewer Black students in the programs that you participated in, or none at all, and being the only person in a whole village. So from your experience, what did you see, or what would you want to see within an ally who also identifies as Black?
I mean, so for me, I think just being aware, you know, it's like, for example, being the only person I mean, I had women coming up to me with half hijabs and juicy jeans asking me, is this ghetto? Is this black? Like you would walk into a doona kebab shop and they would be like, hey, cousin, like watching Miss New Booty on BET. And they just think that like like we're related. And I'm just like, I don't know you. So like my friends had to just be like, no, like they had to like step in because it's so overwhelming sometimes that I'm just like, why am I the only person being asked to authenticate this? Why am I the only person that's in this space? So, really just having a buffer, I say that would be the best form of allyship, is like recognizing and understanding that like you are not by yourself and like actually making an effort to go speak to people. Like you should not be existing in this space on your own, because a lot of times, and I extend this to even biracial people, if you got melanin, go say something to people, because people need to know that I can't hide the melanin that I have. I have no wish to do so, but even if I did, I this is also why, as a result of my experiences, I seek out international students and befriend them, because I know what it's like to be in the situation and it sucks. So, there's a lot of joy and a lot of like, I had a wonderful time. I loved it. That's why I went back and went to grad school there. But I would also say that it can be very overwhelming. So just finding people to be the buffer is probably the most helpful thing you can do.
This is Dre Lenny. I would say that I just have to agree with DRC. I don't have much to add, but that's pretty much like it can be exhausting to have to explain and advocate for yourself all the time. So having someone who just has the willingness to be with you and be in the space and sort of remind you to be joyful of the experience of in addition to everything that might be on. Like I can say that even though I had a lot of hardship while traveling, it was probably the best experience that I had and will have for a lifetime. So having friends and having a group of people who just are willing to be there with you day to day and understand that sometimes it's just going to be hard, is worth it and can make a meaningful impact.
This is Jillian. I also just want to add something shortly. I think like one of the biggest things you can do to be a like ally is just to be mindful of safety. Really making sure that like people that you're with are safe, and then also not bringing other people into situations where they would be unsafe. Specifically like with disability, like not having disabled people go to like inaccessible and like unsafe locations. Really making sure also like if you're an ally, that like you ask and communicate. And I think like just like all of this is indicative of just taking the time to care, and to make yourself like available if that's something that you want to do.
Thank you. These are all really powerful ways that I know I'll for sure be sharing with the students that I work with at Howard, as well as the broader HBCU community. So thank you. Now, speaking again of the students that I work most closely with, who are also Black and university students, and going back to our initial mention of this topic of representation, would you all like to share any more thoughts around any pressure that you may have felt to represent a group, an organization, your study abroad company, your entire race, any of these broader entities that we are a part of, but who are not us as individuals? Any last thoughts you'd like to contribute around that?
Yeah, I would add that sometimes the country themselves will do things to you that you don't even have any control over. So, like a really good example of this is when I went to London, I was told upon my arrival, I got singled out, and they said African students had been coming to the UK on a student visa and disappearing into the system while never enrolling. And so they were like, as an African descendant, you are required to sign a document in the registrar's office every 2 weeks to ensure that you remain, under the eye of the university. And I remember thinking, this is so like colonialist, ableist, racist, like just run down the list because nobody else had to do that. I did. And it literally got to the point where the people in the registrar's office, because I saw them every 2 weeks, they would be like, go ahead and sign for like 6 weeks in advance. Like they was like, we know you here. And I really appreciated that because it got really annoying when you're on your way to the registrar's office again. And it was just like, yep, it's that black time. It's time to be blackety black on paper again. Just because the country had a misunderstanding of the way that people were doing it. So I was like, I'm not even African. My passport is American, but it didn't matter. So I would just add that like occasionally, sometimes countries like will do things, and like I had the same thing happen with my disability in Asia. They were just like, as a disabled person, like you represent a higher risk, so therefore you can't go to X, Y, and Z. Sometimes you have no control, and it is, think of it as the cost. It is a tax of being able to experience the situation and to be able to be there in that place at that moment. You just kind of have to deal, for lack of a better word. I wish there was something more nice I could say about it, but that really I think is what it boils down to. And I don't know if anybody else is going to agree or disagree with me, but that was just my personal take on it.
That's an important awareness for us all to have, especially those of us who are not walking or who are not living your experience. And so that just blew my mind because it is crazy. It's racist, prejudice, colonial centered. It's all of the things that you mentioned, and it's still being practiced today. And most of us would not know, or most of the people who are facilitating the study abroad experiences wouldn't know if they are not people of color. Okay. Whew. Take a little breath. How are we doing as a panel? Let's check in for a second. We're going deep. We're peeling the layers back. Thumbs up. We haven't even gotten to the study part of study abroad. All right, well, if we're all good, let's continue forward and talk about the curriculum abroad. And so if you can share, if the panel will share, how was your experience with the design of the program, including the courses and the extracurricular activities? If you found yourself reflected in the classroom curriculum, do you have an example that stands out that you can share? If you did not find yourself reflected, would you share if or how this impacted your motivation and or feelings about the overall program?
I mean, I was gonna oh, hold on. Fire alarm going here at my house, so I gotta go.
Okay.
This is Julian. I can hop
Thank
in.
you. Okay.
For me, I definitely saw myself represented in both the courses that I took, but it really was difficult. Some was positive, some wasn't. I took an art history course on the Dutch Golden Age, and the Dutch Golden Age and a lot of European Golden Ages are golden ages because of colonialism and slavery. All of that wealth is directly tied to colonization and imperialism and violence against Black people, the African diaspora. And I think, that was definitely acknowledged within the curriculum, but it definitely still put me in really triggering and unsafe positions because of the structure of it. there was a lot of times during my art history course where we would go traveling. And I think in general, when there's an overemphasis on travel, um, it can be exhausting for disabled people. And then also like it can be financially very rough just because you're constantly paying for travel. I was brought to a lot of cities in the Dutch countryside to go to museums and to see um, historical landmarks, and they were beautiful, but there was still that like ghost of colonialism because all of it was just on the backs of African people. Um, and there was just a lot of remnants of racism within the architecture. And particularly, I had this experience when we were in Dutch Harlem, and I was really afraid because there were no people of color. It was all white people, just from the shops. And I kind of like, it's that feeling when you know people are looking at you and it's I don't know how to describe it. I think this is just something that like, if you're Black, you know, it's just like when white people are looking at you and it's not safe. So I was going through that, and we were going through a tour, and pointing out different architecture things. And one of the things that was pointed out was Dutch gaper, and these gapers are giant heads of different people, and these people are typically Black people or Moors, specifically, although they can be Asian or white, but typically they're Black people, and it's their face. With their tongue out in a pill because they're like markers of medical establishments. And because all of these were created during colonialism, during the Dutch Golden Age, they're racist caricatures. So what was pointed out to me was a giant face of a Moor person, but it was in blackface essentially. And all the white people from America kind of looked at it and knew it was blackface. And looked at me, and this also made me extremely uncomfortable, and knew it was blackface. But the professor, even though I think there was acknowledgement of Golden Age being like an extremely violent colonialist era, on some level was not really able to recognize that this gaper figure was also a remnant of that time and was also extremely violent and racist. And also like some of the museums that we would go to, the paintings of people who were enslaved were also kind of triggering. There was a room specifically that we went into that highlighted it, that was sectioned off, and it was expected that we would go in there, and there wasn't really a choice. But it was extremely difficult for me to go in there and look at the different enslaved people in paintings. And I think, although that dedication was nice, I wish I had an option not to participate. And I think educators need to make sure that, like, one, if you're doing a lot of traveling, like you think about disabled people, and you give them options to say no. This is all part of my curriculum, so I didn't really have the option to say no. Two, for Black people, you know, you're bringing them to really triggering places, and there's no care. If there's no care involved, you know, it can be really upsetting. It definitely was for me. There was also a trip in addition to that where we went to Berlin. And we went to the Holocaust Museum and concentration camps, and I felt similarly about that. And then in my other course, I took a gender studies course, which really focused on sex and gender and the colonial history as well. And I had some knowledge about that, but a lot of it did highlight the oppression of trans people. Specifically, there were other non-binary people that came in to speak about gender, which was great because I was able to connect with some of the speakers. and that was nice, but there was also a lot of lack of acknowledgement of like non-binary people's presence, even like the other white non-binary person there. There was a lot of transphobia that just happened within the classroom. Um, because, you know, although there were people that like came, you know, it wasn't presented as like, oh, there are like other like non-binary people in this classroom and we're like studying this about gender. It was like very removed, you know, and I kind of felt invisibilized at that point. And I think in both scenarios, there was an invisibleness that I don't think had to be there. And I think if more care was put into the curriculum, education, um, and consideration for different identities was put into the curriculum education, those things did not have to happen. Um, and yeah, I think both of those things are just really important to highlight.
Absolutely. This is Marina. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing those. Welcome back, DRC. I hope everything is okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. I have no idea what people in this building were doing.
It's okay. We're talking about the curriculum, and
Right.
you or Joy Lenny would like to provide any of your experience, either how you felt being reflected in the classroom curriculum or in the co-curricular activities that were arranged by the program, or how you may have felt not seeing yourself reflected.
So yeah, I just have like one quick thing that I wanted to add about that. So I remember when I came into we had to take classes as part of the program, and my teacher was English class. He was a linguistic professor, and he was doing a lesson on AAVE at this German institute, and so he was trying to explain that he said, you know, unlike literally, I remember like what he said because it was so ridiculous. Like the sentence that he used was like, you know, unlike traditional regular English, where someone would say Joe goes to the store, he said African American English, he's like, people will constantly cut off consonants and add apostrophes in places where they're not supposed to be. So the sentence becomes Joe go to the stove. And when he said that, the whole class like turned and looked at me directly. And I was just like, so I don't know what the hell y'all looking at because I don't speak like that. People used to talk like that in the 1920s and 30s because, wait for it, they couldn't get education because slaves weren't allowed to read and write. But we don't want to talk about that part. And so I was like, you're not going to sit here and make me sound ignorant. Like, you're not going to sit here by association and make me sound ignorant to a bunch of people whom I've never even met. So that happened. And then I remember I had a history class who the professor on the first day, he was a visiting professor from Richmond, and the class was on the civil rights and the South. It was on the US Global South. And he opened the class by saying, you know, I'm from Richmond, Virginia, and in this class, we will study the War of Northern Aggression. The South will rise again. And I literally, in the back of the class, was like, no, we're not doing that. And like everybody in the class started looking at me, and I was like, so what we're not gonna do is that. I was like, you're not gonna sit here and lie to all these Europeans about the Confederacy because you all still lost. So if we're gonna talk about it, let's not forget to add that you lost and surrendered via white sheet. So, you know, and everybody in the class was like, oh wow. I mean, it was, I didn't want to do that, but I also was like, I'm not gonna sit here and listen to blatant lies that come from another place, because these people will sit here and think that like that's real life. And the teacher ended up, I will say that there was a very funny moment in that class because he ended up for our final projects assigning everybody an aspect of the South. And this girl, she had a group, they were doing a project on food, and she said she wanted to do the most iconic food of the South, cornbread. They don't have cornbread in southern Germany. I looked. And so she said that she went to Google and got the recipe. And on the day of the assignment, the day it was due, everybody in class was like, you got to take the first piece because you're from North Carolina. So like if it passes your test, then she could get the stamp of authenticity. And I was just like, this what we doing? this is what I have to do. And so she cut me a piece of the cornbread. I remember biting into it, and I recognized immediately what this child had done. She literally Google translated the recipe to corn in bread. So she literally put corn kernels inside actual like yeast, and like it was an abomination before the Lord God. And I literally had to sit there and smile in front of all these people. And she's like, yeah, it's good, yeah. And I was just like, yeah, it's great. It's just wonderful. And my friend was like, why you lie to her like that? And I was like, because y'all not gonna sit here and make me out to be the villain. Like, I'm the only Black person in this space. You're not gonna do that to me. Do not set me up like that. It's a trap. So I would say that occasionally you might come into situations like that where people will set you up unintentionally into a trap. It's a cultural trap because you're Black and they want to know. And so they'll ask you, like, how many tablespoons of sugar go into Kool-Aid? You know, just nonsense. And you're expected to have an answer. But I mean, you know, of course you can choose not to. But I mean, I wanted to have a good time, and I mean, everybody thought it was funny. And I enjoyed, you know, not crushing her spirit. So I'm gonna let her go on and think that she got the best cornbread in all of Baden-Württemberg, even if it's a lie, and you know, from the pit of hell. But still, you know, I just wanted to bring that up, that like the people in the program like didn't vet the syllabus. Like they didn't vet the assignments. Like they didn't go through with a fine-tooth comb to think about that kind of stuff. They were like, it's just gonna be fine. Like, it's whatever you do, it's gonna be fine. And there were situations where, I mean, it could have definitely not been, but again, I chose to reframe the situation to not turn it into that space. Like you know, yeah, if I want to sit here and argue about my teacher being a raging racist, I could, but I was like, that's not really generative to the experience. And you know, I have to go home with these people. Like we all live in the same student space, so it doesn't do me any good to be yelling at y'all being racist. And so yeah, I just think that that is also, I mean, it's something that you just have to know. From an educator standpoint, I think asking them to see copies of syllabi ahead of time, seeing what people are going to have to do, would be very beneficial to any, like, so you can catch things like that. Because I wasn't trying to be, you know, you're not gonna sit here and ask me to demonstrate the cost of a slave on a chopping block in your class. Like I'm just not, I'm not gonna do it. And I don't want to be seen as difficult or belligerent if I choose not to. And I think that sometimes when dealing with, especially European countries, they'll they love to just be like, oh, well, that person is being difficult. Like, no, like if I was being difficult, I bring up the history of colonialism that allowed you to think that that was okay in the first place. But we're not even gonna, like, half the time you can't do that. So, you know, just recognizing that and just literally pocketing it into the back of your head is something that you kind of have to do on a daily basis.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing again. So this is Morena, sharing so deeply. And what I'm hearing each time I hear a lot of the stories that, you know, the experiences you all are sharing as panelists, I'm hearing a lot of the need to, or the perceived need to self-regulate, to utilize diplomacy, you know, to just try and manage the environment in a way that allows for the best possible outcome for yourself, as well as all of those who are in the experience with you. And that, I know, is exhausting. And that's why, again, this conversation is invaluable for all of those who may have never had to experience this work. So we're coming to the last couple of questions, and no conversation related to study abroad would really be complete without the discussion of money matters. And so there was a mention about some of the costs involved with the program that were either mandatory or that were optional, but felt like they were mandatory because they were associated with a grade, or, you know, an excursion that was related to a grade. But in our planning discussion, Joy Lenny, you mentioned something that really has sat with me and stood out in a way that I think is very important for us to voice here before we close. And that's that the realization or the awareness that having a disability is expensive. And so if you, Joy Lenny, and anyone else on the panel would like to share your experiences as well as any information that you feel a prospective student would benefit from, or someone in the position of professional planning around these study abroad programs as it relates to money matters and disability, if you could share your insights.
This is very lucky. I would say that, I think that I've mentioned it a bit in the conversation already, but there's a lot of things to consider as a student, like transportation and navigating around London was a lot more expensive to me than my peers because I chose not to use the tube for safety reasons. And I mean, DRC shared a little bit of what that can be like, just how inaccessible it is. And so having to put aside more, budget more for things like transportation because you might have to take a cab from point A to point B, or there were times where I would have to budget extra for food expenses because I'd have to pay for delivery service because it wouldn't be as easy to coordinate with my friends so that we could all go to the supermarket together. And it's just those basics, like basic day-to-day things that you need to think about when preparing. So it may seem small at first, but it does add up. And I think that's one thing that I was prepared for, but at the same time, not really, because I still ended up going over budget in those areas. And even with like traveling to other countries, which is something that I didn't really plan for when studying abroad, because I thought, yeah, I'm just going to London and that's it. And then I realized, oh, this opportunity to go elsewhere, and it's part of the culture as students here. So I thought, you know, having to pay for like an accessible hotel room or like something like that, really just, those are things that you have to consider. I think that's what I would say about expenses.
Thank you. And it was just important, I think, to share that in that way. And so this is the last question, and this is the one that I think, DRC, when we were planning, you expressed that the Black Lives Matter movement is a visible representation of how Black people are tired of being silenced. And this panel discussion right here is continued evidence of that. And so this stated, could you each, in kind of closing the moderated questions, could you share one thing, if nothing else, that you hope a Black disabled student will take away from this discussion, as well as one suggestion for all of the professionals with the responsibility of ensuring that study abroad is accessible, equitable, and just for all students?
For me, I would say do it. Hands down, do it. Before I did my study abroad to Germany, I, growing up as a gay Black man with cerebral palsy from the South in North Carolina, you feel literally, it's the research I do in my PhD program. I literally call it like a living ghost. Like you feel beyond invisible because everything in this country, tells you that you shouldn't exist. And people here in this country have been made to make you feel like you're the bottom of the bottom. When I would argue that, going to Europe, the people in Europe, while they do have their idiosyncrasies, they are exposed to much more. They are the side effect of global capitalism is that the people there have truly experienced the world. Before I moved to London, The only people I was trying to date were, typically Black people, white people, and Latinx folks, because those are the only flavors that were in my neighborhood. In London, oh my God, I had every flavor under the sun, all the way across, all the way around. I no longer have preferences because I have gotten to sample everything, and it was marvelous. And so, Europeans are just generally less concerned with disability. I had dudes asking me to the club literally every night on top of the night, 3 and 4 times a day. And it really did change my entire life. Like before going, I had no conception of being attractive. I had no conception of even anybody even caring about my worth or value. And while I recognize now that that was in the lens of fetishization, and that all of it is, a conception of people who, that's something they build in their mind, I'm not gonna lie, it still helped to change my perception. I came back to America with a completely renewed sense of self. Went and got myself a job at NASA. I got an internship with NASA. Like, it completely reframed my viewpoint of value because I didn't think of myself as being valuable. And then going to Europe definitely changed that. And I would also say that once you travel one time, you will become addicted. It's addictive. It will become the hobby that will consume your life. But I would say that for people that are trying to do this, for people, the advice I would give to people responsible for them is to partner with another person of color when you put these programs together. Like, don't assume that you know what a Black person, a Black student of color is gonna need on the, make sure you vet that list by another person of color in your organization, because oftentimes you gonna miss something. And it's gonna be something that's gonna be really crucial and critical to their success and continued enjoyment that you just didn't foresee. And you don't wanna be in a place of emergency management because you didn't realize that nobody could do their hair, or X, Y, and Z. There are so many examples. So that would be the advice that I would give.
I'd like to chime in. This is Joy Lenny. I think that for me, what comes to mind for educators is to include information about accessibility in everything that you do, because as reflected in this panel, there's plenty of Black students who are also disabled. And so I think it's very important to include information about accessibility of programs across diversity as we see it, because it's a very important part of inclusion. And for Black students, Black disabled students, I would say just radiate joy, because I really think that Black joy is radical. And so I think that in my experience of being abroad, all of those like little bad moments and little moments of like overwhelmed and need to advocate for oneself, they really seem as part of the experience when I really just reflect on those immense moments of joy that I experienced with my friends and just traveling around the world. And I totally agree. It is an addictive experience. I mean, I went to about 10 countries while I was abroad, and it was like, it was towards the end of my experience. So it is addictive, but it's totally worth it. And it's worth the obstacle, for lack of a better word.
This is Jillian. I think for me, as a Black disabled person and student abroad, I think going to Amsterdam was so essential for me to be able to dream outside of the US. I really had to laugh a little bit about what Darcy was saying, because I had a bit of a similar experience in terms of just like seeing how my identities and also how I had options, how those things change contextually, and it's not like anti-Blackness is global, and it's not like you can travel and have these experiences change, but traveling gives you options, gives you perspective, and that like if you have the opportunity, like you can have that control of your reality. if that makes sense. I think for disabled Black people in particular, I think, Black people in general are tend to be viewed as like stronger or like more resilient to pain. And I think for me, I really struggled a lot with overexhausting myself. And I really think that had to do with just like the intersections between my disability with like one, like it not being something I disclosed and also being something that was triggered by exhaustion. And two, like, I struggle with mental health issues. And, when you're mentally ill, I think you want to really hang on to good things. So I was constantly like trying to cultivate experiences to the point where it was at the expense of my body. So I really urge Black disabled people to say no to stuff that they can't do, even if they really want to, even if it's like a FOMO thing, even if like, you're feeling like, I could go out to this party and like I'll feel better because I'm like depressed this day, if your body's telling you no, like you need to say no. And I also think really center yourself amidst all the different intersectional challenges that you'll encounter, just because like that's just the reality no matter where you are. For educators, I really think that a lot can be done to center Black students, center disabled students and people who have marginalized experiences in the curriculum. I think the beginning of that is really by getting feedback from people and allowing yourself to have feedback, but also like taking the time to consult people before you administer curriculum, especially if it has to do with marginalized identities, especially if it has to do with colonialism, especially if it has to do with people who experience oppression on the daily. These people are not just in the past. They're not something to be studied intensely. These histories and these people are very much alive today and they need to be respected. And Black disabled people deserve so much love and respect and care. And centering that, I feel like your curriculum on top of everything will get better and stronger, because not only does it harm Black disabled students, it also harms everyone you're teaching because you are not giving an adequate representation or education to people without those things.
Thank you all for sharing so much. We are at our time. We had some questions from the audience, so we apologize for not being able to get to those. But if you would email us, we can follow up with a response that way. This conversation has been a beautiful manifestation of the light that you each hold. And on behalf of myself and everyone watching this live event, and those who will watch it later as a recording, I want to thank you for sharing so generously of yourselves. I also want to show gratitude to Mobility International and National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange for hosting this very important event. And certainly last, but definitely not least, we want to thank Monica Malhotra for her vision for holding this panel and for bringing us all together to get today. If I can leave us all with just one quote, and it's from the 13th century Persian poet Rumi. It's "The wound is the place that our light enters," meaning our wounds offer an invaluable source of insight as a place where our values come from. And I'm not saying that being disabled is a wound by any means, but these experiences that we face abroad as Black people, as disabled people, as people from all different forms of marginalized backgrounds, they hit us in our soul, in our being. And so these are where our value and the light that we shine comes from as people who want to do better and do justice for others in the world. So thank you to the audience. Let's all be well and inspired after this wonderful conversation.
Thank you.